Professor Thakur to deliver the valedictory address today. I would like Dr. Rishi Kaushal to please introduce Professor Thakur to the conference.
चैनल खोल के देख लाइव स्ट्रीम
Very good evening to everyone and a warm welcome to our session of young scholars conference on the theme the Ecolibrium paradigms in economics organized by Department of Economics.
Don't even show us.
Dr. Abhinavinath Thakur, Professor of Economics at Jindal Government and Public Policy, OP Jindal Global University. Dr. Thakur is an alumnus of Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he completed his MA and Physics. His key areas of expertise are development economics, economic policy, applied econometrics, labor economics, agricultural economics, and data science. Dr. Thakur is also a senior research fellow at the Interdisciplinary Research Unit ICR at Ecolibrium Global University and a senior fellow at Anandi Institute of Social Research and his published work includes research articles in many related academic journals and chapters in books published by esteemed publishing houses. Before joining Ecolibrium Global University in 2017, he taught at Delhi University Colleges and Ambedkar University, Delhi. He is also an editor of an international peer-reviewed journal, Socrates, a journal of public policy, public administration and philosophy. He has completed a full 10-course specialization in data science in R from Johns Hopkins University and specialization in statistics with R from Duke University. Sir, your association with our department goes back many years, as you have been an esteemed resource person for our online certificate course on data analysis in R. Data analysis using R since 2021, and I have had the privilege of introducing and welcoming you on numerous occasions for those sessions. And however, today is especially meaningful for me as I have the distinct honor of welcoming you here in person to our college. It is truly a privilege to have you here in this valedictory session. So your words will definitely will give different insight on the topic that you are going to discuss today, and it will also encourage our young scholars who are present at the session. So I thank you for sparing your valuable time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for that gracious introduction. We now invite Professor Abhinavinath Thakur to deliver the valedictory address.
Could you please just put this mic on?
Thank you very much for the organizing team for having me here and such a generous introduction. So thank you. And in fact, I think it's long due because I have been associated with the college for last 5 years, and I think this is the first time I'm here. So I think it's long due, and I was also excited about it. The moment I got an invitation, it was actually immediately yes. So okay, I was also, so thank you very much. Okay, so we'll take half an hour and we can have some questions. So what actually I'm going to talk about today is an ongoing work, of course. I'm presently working on it. A part of it was also I presented, but now, of course, it's a... So what I'm trying to highlight today is employment scenario, because this topic is about resilience. So when we are talking about India, to what extent our employment is resilient, how far Indian employment generation has been resilient or it's sustainable. There have been many research papers, many debates on employment creation for last couple of decades. So I have actually worked on primary data, PLFS data for last 2017 to till date, and tried to understand what has been the trajectory of employment creation, employment generation in a country as a whole during the last 7-8 years, because there's a discontinuity in terms of secondary data in India, particularly with respect to employment, because NSS quinquennial round survey used to happen in every 5 years, but that was discontinued after 2011-12. So now there's a new series of data which is quite different in terms of survey design, in terms of its overall structure. So though people are comparing, in fact I have compared different data in different places, but this talk I'm primarily focusing around whatever is happening to the employment market in India and how far this employment generation or employment creation during the last 7-8 years has been sustainable. So in fact, growth, employment and structural transformation, because when we talk about employment, just a first slide. So since neoliberal reforms, when we talk about employment, largely the focus remained on the growth rate employment. Okay, so it was in fact argued that if you have a very consistent growth over a sustained period of time, employment generation would be systemic. So system will generate employment, that will be resilient, that will be a high quality and all. What you need to do is to keep your growth sustained at a longer period of time. And in fact, largely it draws its conclusion from Okun's law. Okun's very famously collected data and talked about, okay, if you have a 6% and above growth rate for a reasonable period, so automatic employment, a large number of employment are created, unemployment is reduced, and also there will be shift from a low quality to high quality employment automatically through the system. So now, giving that kind of context, I would like to see that what happens in last 7-8 years, whether we are basically having that trend in Indian labor market or not. And if we talk about GDP, this is a World Bank data, so I have calculated it from RBI also, but it's very simple data. So if we talk about GDP, so Indian performance, particularly in terms of growth, has remained more or less satisfactory. In fact, if we compare different period, different decades, 90s, 2000 and recent decade, so middle decade was better in terms of total growth. Nevertheless, if we see the growth rates, except for COVID years, we find that most of the years till 14, the growth rate remained relatively higher than 6%. So higher than 6% growth rate in most of the literature says that it is enough for creating good quality job, and it's enough to promote structural transformation in the economy. What do you mean by structural transformation? Shifting low quality informal job to formal, shifting people from agriculture to industries and services in a substantial manner. So that's basically, so in fact, we have, if we talk Okun's law, so prerequisite volatility was there, but growth rate remained largely above 6%. Now, if we talk about official estimates. Recently, it was probably last year it was published that, okay, to some aspect, employment market is also functioning well. If we look at some employment data, so in fact, if we talk about total employment created, since 1991, if you look at the planning document, they have a target of creating jobs 2 crores per annum in Indian context. And it hardly happened if you simply remove Manrega, which was initiated at that point of time. It was very difficult to generate 2 crore employment per annum. However, if a recent data talks about that, in last 7-8 years, 16.83 crores new jobs were created. So it clearly says that every year more than 2 crores job was created since 2017. In fact, if you look at the other aspect also, labor force participation rate rose. In fact, most importantly, if you look at the official discourse or the data, it shows that remarkable improvements has happened in female part of the employment. So in terms of their labor participation, in terms of their working condition, total number of jobs and all. Okay, so if you have a glance over the recent data, you see that okay, employment market is also functioning well. But as a researcher, one also needs to go deeper to look into the fact in a more concrete manner, because sometimes what you look might not be there. In fact, so what I'm doing, okay, because one thing is that Okun's law or growth linked to the employment generation has remained problematic, not only in India, for entire history of modern economic growth. So there has been some kind of delinking between growth and employment, which has happened not only in India, but also in Western world. Even if you talk about US, which is having more than 350 years of experience of modern economic growth, but yet there are some delinking between growth and employment is there. In fact, very remarkably, Stiglitz talk about that last almost many decades, the real wage rate has not increased in USA also. So, but India, so let's explore whatever happened in India in last 7-8 years. I'm talking about last 7-8 years. So what do we expect if a country is having very sustained growth rate over a 7-8 period, 10 years period? So we expect that, of course, high growth will automatically lead to a employment generation. And then second is that it will, of course, promote structural transformation. People will shift from agriculture, which is low paid, we all know that, to high paid manufacturing and services sector, or from informal to formal. Okay, better quality jobs, like if we talk about better quality jobs, of course, one is that where you are working, it's manufacturing or services, and the other thing is that the type of employment. What type of employment is considered better is regular employment with social security status. And in fact, if you look at the data, you will find that casual wage employment and also to some extent self-employment are largely precarious employment. So in fact, one of the important aspects of growth is also to shift employment from self-employment or casual employment to regular salaried employment, and that too with adequate provision of social securities. So that's something which, and also those who are staying in different sectors, they must witness a substantial rise in their real earnings. That's what we expect from a sustained growth-led employment generation. So that's what I am expecting, I expected from the Indian data. So now if we simply see, this is a unit level work, unit level data I have extracted and worked on all years, but I'm only showing here 17 and 24 with a, because we have a limited time. So this is, so if we talk about, okay, what sectors broadly has created employment. So what I have done, I have actually calculated the entire employment generation from 2017 to 2024. Okay, the latest data we have. And if we, official estimate says that 16 point something, but more reliable employment status is 15 years and above. So you talk about employment, then it's primarily 15 years and above. And what is here, of course, it also shows that employment was created during this period. It is 15 crore, but in my estimate say that above 15 crore jobs were created during this period. So of course, even in that case, every year 2 crore jobs were added despite a kind of some fall in the job status during the COVID period. So that is one thing. But more importantly, one needs to see what sectors actually contributed to job creation during this period of time. Because if it is growth-led employment, so it has to follow a structural transformation path. It has to follow a kind of modern economic growth, which was emphasized by Rostov that, okay, you are transition of the economy is happening from primary to secondary. But however, this table says otherwise. This is something very remarkable here. Whatever job was created in India during this period, more than 50% was in agriculture and allied sector. So that is something which is completely contradictory to the recent discourse on growth and employment. Because when you are talking about growth-led employment, it has to be other sectors. The purpose is to move people from agriculture to other sector. However, what it shows that, you see, the 51% of total job during this period, what I'm trying, if there are 100 jobs created, 51 persons were employed additionally in agriculture sector. And what is less than 10 out of 100 job created, less than 10 was actually there in manufacturing sector. Okay, so this is something which is a problematic. In fact, annual growth was good, 5.92. In fact, if we talk about agriculture during this period, the growth rate of agriculture in terms of GDP contribution was nearly 2 to 3%. So again, that is a problematic concept, because if a sector is having 2 to 3% growth rate, and it is witnessing 7% growth rate in employment, so there is again a mismatch. So, but of course, we will go further. So then again, the next point is that what type of employment was created during this period of time. So if we look at this data where casual waste, and in fact self-employment, when we talk about self-employment, there are 3 subcategories of self-employment in periodic labor force data. One is own account worker, which constitutes the largest part of self-employed. You are working for your own. So that is called own account working, and there are employers. And there is another category, which is in fact very important recent period of time, which is unpaid family worker. Unpaid family workers are those who are basically helping their main worker, those who are engaged in some activities, but they are not getting paid. But of course, they are contributing to family income to some extent. So, and of course, by definition, unpaid family workers are not getting anything in return. Okay, so they are contributing to it. So now if we look at the total rise of employment during this period of time, self-employment, so what I have done, employer and own account worker, I clubbed them together because they are earning. Okay, so earning self-employed. And there is another category which is unpaid family worker. I have kept it separate. So that to understand that, okay, how many of jobs were created in earning aspect and not on other. So what it shows that nearly 74% of total employment which was created in last 7-8 years was in self-employment, and more than 1/3 of the total job created is in the nature of unpaid family worker. And that is basically a contradiction to some sense, because unpaid family workers are not getting anything in return. It's a new concept of employed, but nevertheless, if we talk about regular salaries, less than 1/5 of the total employment was created in regular salary. So this is something, a problematic concept in the job market in India particularly. So this actually says that I have segregated all agriculture. I have compared agriculture 17-18 to agriculture 24, manufacturing 18 to manufacturing 24, its subsectors. And this orange and green line actually shows the self-employment. So not only the self-employment has increased entirely, but in each of these subsectors, you find the actual drivers of growth was self-employment, including unpaid family labor. So unpaid family labor and own account workers actually remained main drivers of the increased employment. So they were majorly responsible for rising employment share. So okay, again, this is not bad if your average earnings is increasing significantly for self-employed workers. Okay, because again, you may start some venture, you are doing something by your own, your family supporting it, and if your income is increasing substantially, then there is no problem in it. The only consideration here is that if self-employment or unpaid family labor share is rising significantly, so their income should also increase significantly. That is one thing. And second aspect is that if you talk about growth-led employment, so employment increases particularly in those sectors where the income growth happened the most, because it's a pulling factor. So some sectors are rising. The very idea of growth rate employment generation is that some sectors actually are growing very fast. They require more people to employ, and therefore people are coming to those areas for getting job, and their income is higher. That's what Lewis also hypothesized in his very famous Lewisian transition model. That okay, modern sector is having high employment, high wages, high earnings, so therefore people are basically attracted to that. So here, one thing is very clear, that the employment in each of these sectors, self-employment, including unpaid family labor, actually increased significantly. Now, if we talk about gender composition, this is also a very striking factor. This is a very different factor of Indian economic transition of labor market in India particularly. So, in fact, India had been struggling for long to make participation of women more in the economy. In fact, labor force participation rate, worker population ratio remained quite low, remarkably low in India compared to even developing countries. And in fact, till 2017, if we talk about all NSS round, there was not only the low female participation, but declining also. In fact, there's a large number of works has been done on why labor force for women is declining. Okay, why women are not participating in the economy particularly. So that trend is showing some reversal in recent period. If we look at this, because there's a big table, I don't want to go into the entire detail. I've just highlighted a few things. Like, if we talk about total numbers, you see that this yellow part, agriculture and forestry, what was the change? 9 million additional jobs were created for male, while during the same period, 68.53 million jobs was created for female in agriculture sector. So huge difference. So you see that if we go to change, total male employment increase during this period was 56 million, while for female, it was 96 million. So for the first time in the history of Indian economy, that the total employment created for female was simply more than double than their male counterpart. So it's huge. Okay. Again, in every sector you see, the jobs was primarily created for female. In fact, total rise of whatever employment was created, 64% was only for female. And you know that it's, if you look at the total base, you see 285 million in case of male. So female, it's very low, less than half. So basically, when you have if there are 100 males, only 50, less than 50 females are working. And then you find the total rise in employment is higher for female compared to male. So this is something which is a remarkable feature of Indian labor market, particularly during this period. Now, if we talk about how this gender composition of within different types of employment, so again it's a similar story, that large part of this rise in employment happened in self-employment and unpaid family labors. You see that huge differences, huge growth is there. So you can see the change. So majority of the changes in the employment happened in unpaid family labor and self-employment for female. So basically, female employment, particularly self-employment, remained the main drivers of growth of employment during this period of time. You can see that 51% in total job creation is only for female self-employment. Just you club everyone together, male, female, all type of employment, more than half job was created only for female self-employed during this period of time. So very striking features. And and another very important feature is that rise in subsidiary work also. So if we simply segregate the entire workforce in primary and secondary, principal activity and subsidiary activity, we find that nearly 37.5, that is also unprecedented. So nearly, more than 37% of total employment was created in subsidiary part-time basis. Okay, so that is also a very different feature. And that what type of part-time? So 78% of total rise in subsidiary works is in agriculture and allied. And 85% of all subsidiary status jobs were created for female workers. So in fact, the entire job creation was heavily tilted towards subsidiary jobs, that too for female. Okay, so without going into the detail, what I then did, I actually wanted to know what type of employment is actually more precise about the employment generation. So what I did, I take out top 30 activities which contributed to, I have a list of top 30 activities which actually absorbed maximum employment. In fact, it says that 85% of total job created during this period was absorbed by only 30 activities. Okay, and what are those 30 activities? We find that a large number of them are in agriculture sector, like fiber cultivation, rice, mixed agriculture, sugarcane, wheat contract farming, soybean, chili, mustard, groundnut. These activities actually absorbed nearly 57.8% of total employment. Okay, and if we simply, without going into detail, if we go only 3 activities during the first top 3 was basically in manufacturing sector, and 3 manufacturing sector which witnessed a job creation. One was custom tailoring, beadi manufacturing, and furniture manufacturing. So these 3 combined together were in top 30, which constituted only 5.45% of total job creation during this period of time. So basically what my point is that entire growth of this employment, manufacturing sector remained largely absent. So the major role was there for agriculture, of course nearly 60% agriculture, and only in 5-6 crop you find a substantial rise in labor absorption in those sectors. Construction also, you saw 2-3 construction sectors also witnessed reasonable growth, but they are casual wage laborers. Okay, so again going slightly further, so this is which I already talked about. So now, again within that, in top 30, the trend is very similar. It's primarily self-employed female, which constituted maximum part of it, 75% of those. So now the question is that, okay, self-employment is not in itself bad if your earnings are rising in that sector. Because in Okun's law, any theory, any economic standard theory which talks about growth pulling employment effect is that it's associated with rising income of that sector particularly. If people are moving to a certain sector, certain activities, it certainly means that because of growth, they require more people. The demand is higher, and therefore the wage rate is substantially higher. That's why people are moving from other sectors or other activities to that activities. So the notion is that one has a very high growth of real wage rate in those sectors in order to attract more people in that. So now if we look at so we will talk about the entire self-employment first, because it actually constituted a large part of total growth, and then we'll talk about top 30 very briefly. So So first, if we talk about this graph, shows that the first 2 graphs you see, own account worker, self-employed earnings, all self-employed, and regular salaried. And what is very surprising here is that each of these category of employment actually witnessed a significant fall in average earnings, real earnings, during the same period. And what is even more surprising is that these 2 regular salaried, of course, their job contribution was very low. Okay, so one can understand that. But what is more striking here is that if you talk about self-employment, which remains a drivers of the growth of employment, witnessed a sharp fall in average earnings. And that is something which is a serious concern for any researcher working on employment field. So I will talk about that also. Now, secondly, if we simply segregate all these things, because primary sector remained a main drivers. Of course, all self-employed remained the primary sector. We already saw that more than half of the total absorption was there in agriculture sector. What is surprising is that in each of these sectors, if we divide them in primary, secondary, and tertiary, all self-employed within those specific sectors witnessed a significant fall in average earnings during this period. And in fact, I have calculated median also, and this is also true for top 30 activities. So what do you expect? So the top 30 drivers of employment growth, if it is led by the growth, it has to show a substantial rise in average earnings. If people are moving towards those top 30 sectors, only 30, you can count them. Out of 1,000, more than 1,000 activities, only 30 contributed to massive shift in employment, massive creation of employment. You, of course, expect that those 30 sectors must have witnessed a sharp rise in the average earnings, so that people are being attracted to those sectors. But what is quite contradictory here, even in each of these sectors, we find a substantial fall in real earnings, average real earnings in those sectors. So this is, of course, and if we talk about so same pattern is there if we talk about median and mean. So all primary, secondary, tertiary sectors, average earnings are falling very consistently in terms of mean. So And similar pattern is there for regular employed, except for primary sector. And let me make this clear that primary sector is negligible percentage of people are there in regular employed. So it does not have any contribution in significant contribution in regular employed. So what we see is secondary and tertiary, which actually employ on a regular basis, also witnessed significant fall in average real earnings. So that is also a matter of concern. And if we simply divide again female, because again we know that was for all male and female together, and because female, as we already discussed, that main drivers of the job growth in recent period. So whatever happened to female, it's very clear that in all sectors except transport and agriculture, again in these two sectors, females' contribution is negligible. Okay, so particularly, regular salaried, female salaried workers is almost negligible. All other sectors, average real earnings, monthly earnings of regular salaried employed witnessed a substantial fall during this period of time. And if we simply include unpaid family laborers, because the idea is that unpaid family laborers are dependent on their paid counterpart. So those who are basically doing the activity, on account workers or employers, so basically they are attached, so unpaid family laborers are attached to their income. So if we club all of them together as a one bracket self-employment, what is very striking is that in every aspect you find a significant fall in earnings of self-employment. And what is also very important, you can see that agriculture, forestry, which is not even sustainable. So which actually attracted the majority of the jobs, had a average earnings far below than average daily working. People are getting average daily earnings. So casual wage. So for the first time in this period, you find that average earning of self-employed is not only far below than regular salaried employed, but also far below than casual wage employment, casual wage earnings. So now this is basically real earnings for female in top 30 activities. Again, you find a similar trend. So it's almost a clear fall. So okay, so we'll have more there. So what I'm trying to say here, okay, there are a few things. One, if without going into the summary of it, so what is very important is that whenever you have a growth rate employment, it is a necessary condition for the economy to have a substantial rise in income. So employment is followed by income. So income is a driving force of any sectors if you have a employment growth connected to employment. But that is completely missing in Indian scenario right now. That is the one thing. Second, whenever you have a growth, the main contributors of growth, usually the modern sector. So you expect that more employment, more attraction of jobs is there for the modern sector. However, Indian scenario is slightly problematic because all manufacturing and services sector, particularly formal, hardly shown any substantial shift in the employment. So in fact, for the first time in Indian, if you see the trends from independence, the first time it is happening that there is a reversal of structural transformation. So for the first time, the share of agriculture in terms of total employment is increasing in last decade. So this has never happened since independence. Of course, India was overburdened with agriculture and all. 90% at the time of independence, 90% of population was there. But gradually, India witnessed removal of people from agriculture and shifting to other sectors. But what is happening recently is somehow problematic concept that agriculture is becoming even the main parking lot of increased employment. So now I would like to, because it's a research scholars, so I don't want to give my theories on that, but there are certain very important questions which one can raise. So there are broadly two aspects one can do a research. The one is that either the growth numbers are not good enough, 6% as formulated by Okun or most of the theorists, that if you are having a sustained growth of 6% growth rate, then you will have a continuous growth in employment, quality employment, automatic structure transformation would happen. So there is problem with the growth rate. Either the growth rate is not 6%, there is some issue with that, because in India, it's a very complicated procedure, but anyway. So this doubt is not there, but doubt is that second aspect. If the growth is really 6%, then second is that there must be some kind of delinking between growth and employment. So even if growth is happening, because what I'm trying to make a point here, that even during the period of in between mid 2000, where the growth rate was substantially high in India, there also systematic absorption of people in core sectors remained very limited. If you simply exclude employment created by Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Employment Generation Scheme, you will find that the systemic transformation or systemic rise in the high quality jobs was even low at that point of time. So if during the last 3 decades, if you simply remove Manrega and other direct schemes, you will find that the economy's capacity to create employment has not only been low, but to large extent declining. So I think one of the most important research topic nowadays is certainly how this growth is linked to employment. Okay, what is happening there? So there are many approaches to that. So why this delinking is happening, whether it's a new phenomena, old, where theory defines that, or you need some kind of tilting in growth rate, some kind of approach towards changing the pattern of growth, or there are some very fundamental problems with the growth. Okay, that is not translated into creation of quality employment. And in fact, if I talk about structural transformation, in my idea is that there is some fundamental problem, because even in Europe, if we talk about industrial revolution and post, long 19th century, in which most of the European countries actually achieved structural transformation, high quality jobs creation. In fact, that period is also characterized by massive out-migration of people from Europe. More than 60 million people during a very brief period of time migrated away from Europe, and most of them were actually from lower middle class and in fact lower class, working class. So they settle in USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, a different part of the world. So in fact, if we really, what my proposal here is that one needs to really think about the connection between growth and its capacity to generate qualitative employment. If we need to shift substantially from agriculture to quality employment, one needs to go beyond from the growth narrative. So what we do need to do, but first thing which is more important is that to understand the problem. Any disease can only be cured if you recognize the disease. If you understand that there is a problem there. And I think because the research scholars seminar, so I will simply end it that always ask questions, think critically, and always talk about, it's posing questions are very important. Looking deeper is extremely important. Okay, don't take things as it is. So basically, first thing is that you need to recognize the problem, and then you talk about this. I am not going to talk about, what we can do. I have my own perception that might be different, but at this stage, I would only share with you my perspective, my idea, and it's open for you to look towards it, to think about it, to include, the solution of it. Thank you. Any questions or anything we can?
If anyone has any question.
Good evening, sir. I am Shubhamal Patra. I am in my third year in the BA program. I have 2 questions. First, you mentioned that from 2017 to 18, with your time period, is that we see an increase in people getting employed in the agriculture sector. Now we had another lectures by Dr. Himanshu, where in the same time period he mentioned that how urban labor is moving back to their villages,
yes,
to their fields.
Yes.
Now so that time it was he attributed it that it could be due to the GST implementation as well as demonetization. So is it the same reason here as well? And the second question is that you mentioned that a steep rise in self-employment among women. So what could be the underlying cause for that?
Yeah, so I think no, it's a GST, whatever GST or demonetization done, it was already done by 2017. Okay, so what I think, in my opinion, is that in fact the formal sector, one is that if you look at the growth of manufacturing, okay, and the formal sector, it has been sluggish, it's decelerating. For the first time again, there is a fall in the share of manufacturing because it remained more or less, industry sector remained nearly 25% of GDP, but now there is a fall in their relative share. So, but in fact, just 2 days back, you have news that even further this quarter, manufacturing sectors actually witnessed a sharp fall in their growth rate. So what we have been witnessing for last a decade or so, that there has been a sharp deceleration in the growth of the manufacturing sector. Okay, so that is one thing. So one thing is that even the manufacturing sector is not growing, it shows some kind of decline. The other important factor is that even with that decline, the delinking between manufacturing growth and its employment creation is actually very much in the card. So what my idea is that, so it's not the formal sector which is ready to provide employment. It's basically lack of employment generation which is happening in the formal sector is the reason for people to shifting. What Himanshu actually said is the same way that people moving from urban area to rural area as a parking lot. And in fact, it could have been better if the average income in agriculture or other sectors could have increased. But what we witness that there is a fall in self-employment income. So it's certainly not the prospect which is basically driving people from urban to rural area. It's basically a kind of distress which is prevailing in urban area. That is one thing. Second is, female employment. So what happens, if we go back to the trajectory of Indian development, in 2004-5 also, there was a substantial rise in female participation. But many papers then talked about that it was primarily agrarian distress, which actually translated into a need to earn more. So female actually move out from the houses and started working on a subsidiary basis. So one thing is that if people are coming back to their villages, let's say migration, reverse migration, which actually was quite prevalent in 2020 after COVID, and equivalent job was not created even during the post-COVID period. So what happens if people are coming back to agriculture? So agriculture is not having sufficient means to provide them. So therefore you need subsidiary income, you need to get income. So one aspect, of course, it's very difficult. You do not have panel data in agriculture. So one possibility is that, so there is a kind of diversification of income. In fact, you will find that within family also, diversification has increased significantly during the recent period. So one way is that, to some extent, the failure of the modern sector to create employment is translated into a further overburdening of the agriculture sector and rise in self-employment of female to supplement the income.
Any other question?
Thank you for the wonderful session, sir. So I want to ask related to the structural transformation only. So as we know, related to the female employment in agriculture, that in the structural transformation, people shift from the agriculture